Terry Lang was used to long drives, back roads, and late-night deliveries, but something about this one felt off the moment it popped into his tablet. He had just finished a residential drop-off outside Fallon, Nevada, and was heading back toward the I-80 junction when the system pinged one new stop added. No warning, no reroute request, just a final drop marked as priority with a name, H. Ward, and an address he didn't recognize, Dunlow. He frowned at the screen. No city listed, just Dunlow, and a pin dropped deep into the desert, northwest of his current route, right where the map started to blur out. He zoomed in. A faint trail of road, wound out past a ghost gray wash of topography. Looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s, but the route guidance lit green. ETA 44 minutes. Terry debated ignoring it. It was already after 7:30 p.m., and the sun had dipped low enough that the desert was starting to bleed shadows, but his contract included a clause for real-time reroute. Ignoring one could ding his pay, or worse, get him flagged. Besides, he was ahead of schedule. He hit accept. The voice assistant gave a gentle chime and instructed him to turn right in 800 feet. The pavement thinned fast. 10 minutes later, he was rolling across chipped asphalt flanked by brittle grass and rust-colored hills. No signs, no fences, just a smear of road, flanked by telephone poles that leaned like old men in the wind. The sun dropped below the horizon without ceremony, and the world drained of color. His headlights cut a tight cone through the gloom, revealing nothing but dust and the occasional coyote slipping between brush. He checked his phone. No service, just 4 dots blinking across his delivery app, and the name Dunlow floating above a half-rendered map. When he finally crested the last ridge, he almost missed it. The town was that small. A fading sign, half swallowed by sand, leaned to the right. Welcome to Dunlow, EST 1891. Someone had spray-painted over the bottom half, with thick black slashes, letters warped and bleeding down the wood like melting ink. Terry slowed the truck and eased into what looked like the town's main street. A single stretch of cracked road, lined with broken buildings, a shuttered general store, a saloon with no windows, a boarded-up motel with a rusted key box hanging off the wall. No lights, no movement. Every door either sagged or stood slightly ajar, like the town had been caught mid-breath and left to rot. He drove slowly, tires crunching on gravel and glass. This place isn't just abandoned, he muttered. It's fossilized. Still, the delivery tablet glowed. Address matched. 12 Main Street, Dunlow. His eyes scanned the street. Numbers were missing or weathered down to ghost marks. But the house at the end, 2 stories, old Victorian bones, porch slumped like a tired jaw, had a small metal plate bolted to the frame. 12. He parked in front, left the engine running, grabbed the package from the front seat. It was medium-sized, heavy, wrapped in plain brown, with no return label. The delivery note read only, H. Ward, personal. He stepped out. The air was still, not calm, still, like something had drained the sound from it. Even the wind held its breath. Terry walked slowly up the cracked sidewalk. The porch boards groaned underfoot. He reached the door, knocked twice. Silence. He waited. Nothing. He knocked again. The sound echoed strangely, like it hit empty halls behind the door, and kept bouncing. Then, knock, knock. Identical, from inside. Same rhythm, same delay. Terry froze. He leaned closer, ear inches from the door. Nothing now. No footsteps, no creak, just that chill crawling up his spine. He glanced down at the package, considered leaving it on the step, snapping a photo, calling it done. But then the door handle clicked, not turned, clicked, and the door creaked open just an inch. Darkness inside, thick and unmoving. A voice, neither loud nor soft, floated out. Leave it on the table. Terry's throat went dry. Who? No answer. He stepped back, looked around. No cars, no movement, just that weird frozen sky, and buildings that leaned in too close. Something in him said to leave, but the delivery app still blinked, pending signature, and in that moment, all his training, all his protocol, pulled him forward like a leash. He nudged the door open, and stepped inside. Terry stepped into the house like it might bite him. The floor creaked once beneath his boot, then held. The air was heavy, humid in a way that didn't make sense for a desert night. It smelled like wet wood, like mildew and scorched paper, the kind of smell that clings to buildings long after they've been gutted by fire or memory. The door eased shut behind him, not slamming, just gliding, like someone gave it a gentle push. He turned, half expecting to see a hand retreating from the knob. Nothing, just the inside of the house. Long hallway, dark wood walls, wallpaper curling at the edges, like it had been forgotten for 50 years. Ahead, a narrow foyer opened into a living room, barely lit by moonlight, filtering through yellowed curtains. There was a table in the center, square, dusty, unmoved in years. Except, there was no dust on the center of the table, just one clean square, like something had recently been placed there, or someone had wiped it off. Terry swallowed, his fingers tightening around the package. "Ah, I've got a delivery for H. Ward," he said, voice too loud in the stillness. No reply. He set the package down in the dustless spot. That should have been it. He should have walked out, shut the door behind him, and driven away. But the moment he turned to go, he saw something else. A clipboard. It sat at the far edge of the table, just sitting there. Blank paper, ballpoint pen attached, with a faded green cord. He took a step closer. The form was already filled out. Name, address, delivery time, exactly 9:13 p.m. Only the signature line remained empty. Terry frowned. He didn't carry physical clipboards. All his confirmations were done via touchscreen or pen. This wasn't his. It was waiting for someone. He looked around. "Mr. Ward," he called out. No answer, just a faint creaking from the second floor, a sound like weight shifting above him. He stared back down at the form. The pen twitched. Not much, just once, a tiny flick, like someone had bumped the table. Then slowly, deliberately, the pen began to move. Terry stumbled back, nearly knocking into a dusty bookshelf. The pen scratched against the paper with short, hesitant strokes. It moved like someone was guiding it with an invisible hand, struggling through muscle memory, as if signing a name for the 1000th time from underneath a grave. Ward, neat, shaky, final. As soon as the signature finished, the pen rolled off the clipboard and dropped to the floor. Terry didn't move. Couldn't. The air had changed. He could feel it in his teeth now. A dull pressure, like standing in a house with all the windows sealed shut, like the walls were pressing inward. He turned and walked out. Didn't run, didn't speak, just walked, calmly, one foot after the other, like his body knew better than to draw attention to itself. When he reached the door, he paused. He hadn't closed it when he entered, but it was closed now. He reached for the knob. It turned freely. He stepped back out, into the cold desert night. The air hit him, like a gasp, cool, dry, real. His boots hit the porch with a final thud, and he moved quickly down the steps, heart thudding, ears still tuned to the silence behind him. He didn't look back, not until he reached the truck, and when he did, the porch light was on. He hadn't seen it before. It cast a pale cone downward, illuminating the house number, the porch swing, the front door, and there, standing in the window beside the door, was a figure, just a shadow, tall, still, watching. He climbed into the cab, shut the door, and turned the key. The engine didn't start. He tried again. Click, click, nothing. The lights on the dashboard blinked, then faded. He cursed, pulled out his phone to check his app. Still no signal. The tablet on the dash flickered to life, the delivery screen glowing with pale green text. Delivery completed. Signed. Etchward beneath that, a blinking message. New stop added. Return to hub. He pressed the back button. The screen didn't change. He pressed again, harder. Nothing. He looked up. The house was dark again. The porch light gone. No figure in the window. No sound. He took a breath and stepped out of the cab, intending to check under the hood. The truck was no longer parked in front of the house. It was sitting around the corner, 10 feet down the block, keys still in the ignition, headlights on, engine idling, exactly where he hadn't left it. Terry stared at the building behind him. No one was there. No sign of the package. No sign of the clipboard. Just that door, closed again, and the porch, now covered in a thick coat of dust. No footprints, no sign he had ever walked there at all. Terry stood in the middle of the empty street, arms slack at his sides, staring at the truck that had moved itself. He didn't remember walking around the block, didn't remember turning the wheel. He wasn't sleep-deprived. He'd had 2 coffees and a sandwich an hour before Fallon, but none of that mattered now. The truck was there, humming softly under the faint orange breath of its headlights, sitting where it shouldn't be. He slowly walked over, each footstep crunching glass and dust. The air had gone bone dry again. The sense of something wet and sick inside the house had vanished the moment the front door closed behind him. It was like the building itself had been sealed shut, like a tomb reburied after a disturbance. When Terry climbed into the cab, the engine purred like normal. All the gauges read fine. Fuel was steady, battery full, no check lights, like nothing had happened, except a tablet. The screen was glowing again, and it showed only a single command: return to hub, route complete. But when he pressed it, nothing happened. The screen froze. The buttons locked. The GPS didn't update. There was no route home. He tapped the screen again, harder. Still nothing. So he put the truck in gear and drove back the way he came. The road wound past the general store, the diner, the rotted motel sign. He turned at the corner where he swore he had first entered the town and followed the cracked pavement west. After 3 miles of silence, he saw a sign, white, faded, "Welcome to Dunlow, EST, 1891. He hit the brakes. No, that wasn't possible. He looked back, nothing but scrubland and flat darkness. He turned around and retraced the road again, eyes locked on every detail. After 5 minutes, the same sign appeared, the same exact angle, same sagging telephone pole beside it. He hadn't turned, hadn't looped. He had driven in a straight line, but the town had circled him back. He tried again, turned onto what looked like a side road, gravel, and uneven, barely wide enough for his wheels. He followed it for what felt like 20 minutes, the landscape growing darker, less real. And then, he arrived back in the town square. Same diner, same porch. He cut the engine and got out. "Nope," he said aloud. "Nope, we're not doing this." He stomped across the street toward the boarded-up building that once said Dunlow Cafe, kicked a door twice, and ducked under a fallen beam into the dust-choked interior. There were old booths with shredded vinyl, menus that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades, and pinned along the back wall, beneath a cracked mirror, were photographs, rows of them, black and white, some sepia-toned, all mounted on rusted nails. Each showed a delivery truck parked on the same street he'd just driven. Same buildings, same sign, different decades. Some were ancient box vans, others looked mid-century. One was a UPS truck, one had no visible logo at all, and in every photo, a driver stood beside the vehicle,
posed, smiling, expressionless. One photo in the bottom corner stopped him cold. It was him. Same truck, same jacket, same haircut, but the photo was yellowed. The corners curled. The bottom was labeled in fading ink. D. Lang, September 12, 1947. He staggered back. No, he whispered. He grabbed the photo, tried to pull it off the wall. It didn't move. It was fused to the glass, as if it had always been there. Then he noticed the mirror above it. It was cracked down the center, but still mostly intact, and in it, his reflection wasn't alone. Behind him stood a figure, tall, stiff, dressed like a mail carrier from the 1950s, gray uniform, wide-brimmed hat, leather satchel slung over one shoulder. The man's face was wrong, not in a grotesque way, just wrong. Eyes too wide, mouth too narrow, jaw stiff like a mannequin, forced into expression. He didn't blink, he didn't move, just stood there.
Terry turned around. No one. The diner was empty, but in the mirror, still there. Closer, he ran. Out of the diner, across the street, into the truck, slammed the door, locked it. The mirrors were black, not reflecting, just black, like the glass had stopped trying. He hit the ignition. The truck roared to life. The radio clicked on. He hadn't touched it. It was just static at first. Then beneath it, a voice came through, raspy, choked, familiar. Don't leave it undelivered. Then a second voice, soft, tired. Don't forget to sign. He floored it, didn't care if the road looped, or twisted, or fell off a cliff. He just needed out. And still, after 15 minutes, 2 turns, and 1 hill that shouldn't have existed, he ended up back in Dunlow, parked in front of the same house, number 12. The porch light was on again. Then the front door was open, just wide enough to see that the package he'd delivered was sitting back on the table, unopened, waiting. Terry didn't get out right away. He just stared at the house. That door hadn't been open when he left. He was sure of it. He had watched it swing shut behind him, had felt the tension break the moment it latched. But now, under the dim yellow glow of the porch light, the door was cracked open again, welcoming or daring, and the package he had delivered, the one he'd watched get signed for by an invisible hand, it was right back where it had started. Same box, same plain brown wrap, same black marker, H. Ward, personal, as if the entire first delivery hadn't happened, as if he had never been there at all. The truck engine idled low behind him, casting long shadows across the house's peeling paint and sagging railings. A breeze kicked up, dry and full of sand, brushing across his arms, like the world itself, trying to usher him away. But something inside the cab was louder, a need to understand, to finish, to figure out who, or what, H. Ward was, and why this town had dragged him into its orbit. Terry grabbed a flashlight from the glove box and got out. This time, he didn't go back to the house. Instead, he walked toward the back of town, where a row of buildings leaned into each other, like drunks at closing time. He passed a crumbling barber shop, a schoolhouse with shattered windows, and finally, near the edge of the old dirt loop, a structure with a rusted blue sign, barely clinging to its frame. U.S. Post Office, Dunlow Branch. The door was unlocked. The hinges groaned, but didn't resist. Inside, the air was heavy with rot. The walls were lined with pigeonholes, stuffed with yellowing mail, envelopes, catalogs, handwritten letters. Some had postmarks dating back to the 1940s. But what froze him was the far wall, the packages, hundreds of them, stacked in uneven towers, some wrapped in brown paper, some in branded boxes from companies that hadn't existed in 50 years, and every single one bore the same recipient.
Ward 12 Main Street, Dunlow, Nevada. He moved slowly, flashlight beam scanning across packages, addressed from all over the country. Some return addresses were scribbled in fountain pen, others printed in fading dot matrix ink, but all of them had been sent here. All of them had never been opened. A cold realization settled into his spine. Whoever H. Ward was, they had been waiting for decades, maybe longer. Terry stepped deeper into the post office, careful not to knock anything over. A brittle sheet of newspaper lay draped across a nearby desk. He leaned in, brushing dust from the front page. Hejonlo Gazette, June 2nd, 1952. Depot explosion kills 9. Mail courier, among dead. His eyes darted down the column. A local delivery driver, Harold Ward, had been making routine rounds when a faulty propane line ignited the back of the town's rail depot. Fire crews couldn't reach the town in time. The depot burned to the ground, taking several buildings and 9 lives with it, including H. Ward. But that didn't explain anything. He looked again at the shelves, so many packages, undelivered or unaccepted. A noise pulled his attention, not a footstep, a shuffle, behind the sorting table, at the back of the room. He moved slowly, flashlight held high, and there, sitting against the wall, was a mail satchel, leather, buckled shut, still bearing the patch. H. Ward, Royal Courier. He reached for it, and as soon as his fingers touched the strap, something whispered behind him, low, hollow, right against his neck. "You're holding my route." He spun around. The post office was empty, but the flashlight dimmed, not from the batteries, from the room itself. The light couldn't penetrate the air anymore. The darkness was thick, absorbing, as if the building had awakened and remembered it was supposed to be ashes. Terry ran. Out the door, across the street, past the broken school, and the diner, and the gas pumps that hadn't worked in 70 years. He didn't stop until he reached the truck. But when he looked up at the tablet, it was glowing and blinking. Set scheduled return, 9:13 p.m. Next delivery, LAN. Personal. A new package sat in the passenger seat, brown wrapped, unmarked, except for one label, written in the same shaky black ink. Return to sender. Terry didn't pick it up. He didn't touch it. He just sat there, heart thudding, staring at the tablet. Because the map had changed again. There was only one location now, only one stop, 12 Main Street, and this time, the name on the clipboard, waiting inside, wasn't H. Ward, it was his own. Terry didn't move. The truck engine was still idling, humming like it had been doing nothing wrong all night. The new package sat silently in the passenger seat, brown paper, wrapped tight around its shape, like skin stretched over bone. Return to sender, was all it said. No address, no barcode, no return name.
The same one as before. Blank sheet, pen dangling from a green cord. He walked slowly, the box held stiff in his arms, like it might explode. The porch steps groaned under his boots. The floor inside creaked in response, and as he crossed the threshold, it felt like crossing into something deeper than a house, like stepping between layers of time. The temperature dropped. The air grew denser. Every sound faded behind him, like the town had drawn a curtain shut. He set the package on the table. The clipboard remained untouched, but the pen twitched once. He stared at it, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. Instead, the whisper returned, right at his ear. "You have to sign." Terry stepped back. "No, I didn't ask for this. I delivered what I was told to. I did my part." The voice came again, more firm this time. "Not signed, not delivered." He turned toward the door. It was closed. He hadn't closed it. He ran to it, grabbed the knob. It wouldn't turn. The windows went black, the moonlight gone. He was inside something now. Not just the house, the town, the memory. He turned slowly. A figure stood by the stairs. Tall gray uniform, leather satchel slung low. Harold Ward. Only it wasn't a man anymore. It was the shape of a man. A smudge. A leftover. Burned at the edges, like a photo left too close to flame. "You wrote," it rasped. "It's yours now. I'm not part of this. You are now." Terry backed away, bumping into the table. The package shifted beside him. He looked down. The tape had peeled open on its own. Inside was a photograph. Himself, taken from behind. Outside the post office. He picked it up. The photo was dated September 13th, 2023. Underneath it, more papers, forms, signatures. Each one bore a name. Scratched in shaky handwriting, some names had been crossed out. One remained blank, the line waiting for him. Recipient, T. Lang. His heart pounded. He looked at the clipboard again. The pen was upright now. Waiting, he reached out, slowly, fingers trembling. As soon as he touched the pen, the air shifted, like a breath held too long. Finally released, he signed. The second the last letter of his name curved onto the page. The room changed. Light flooded in. The windows glowed with moonlight again. The front door creaked open behind him. He turned, but the town outside was not the same. The diner had lights on. People moved in the street. Cars from different decades rolled by. 1950s, Chevys, boxy 80s vans, modern delivery trucks. Like every delivery driver who had ever been sent here, had never left. Each of them carried something, and none of them looked alive. Just stuck, caught in motion, repeating routes that could never end. He turned back to the table. The package was gone, the clipboard gone, and so was the man. Terry ran. Out the front door, back into the street. His truck was gone. In its place sat a different one, an older model, rusted brown, keys in the ignition, logo scraped off the side. He opened the door. Inside was a satchel, and a clipboard, and a list. Deliveries due. 5. Each name was blank, but the addresses, they were all in Dunlow. The tablet mounted to the dash, flickered, then settled on a screen he'd never seen. "Welcome courier." "Begin route." He stared at it for a long time. Then the ignition turned on by itself. The headlights lit up the empty street, and slowly, the truck began to roll. A week later, Terry Lang's company marked him as missing. No distress call, no final ping from the delivery tablet, just silence. The last completed stop listed on the server was in a town the system claimed didn't exist. Delivered, H. Ward. Signed, T. Lang. Somewhere in the desert, off a road that twists wrong after sundown, a town waits for the next delivery. And inside its post office, where the shelves reach the ceiling, one more package now bears his name. Miles Redding hadn't seen another car for over an hour. The Nevada desert had swallowed the last traces of civilization miles back, and his fuel gauge was edging low enough to make his pulse tick faster. He'd been driving long-haul routes for years, but something about this stretch of state road made his hands feel tighter on the wheel. The dusk was spreading fast, drawing long shadows from the hills and draining the heat from the air. With every passing mile, the land looked less like part of the country and more like some place time had dropped and forgotten. Then, just as the last of the sun folded beneath the horizon, a flicker of neon caught his eye, a glowing red sign perched above an old chrome building tucked off the side of the road. It blinked against the dusk, like a heartbeat. Melody's Place, open 24 hours. He turned off the highway and pulled in. The lot was cracked, but clean. Several cars were already parked, 2 Fords with tail fins, a dusty Chevy pickup, and a Cadillac that looked like it had rolled out of a museum. Miles frowned. Not a single modern vehicle. Not one. But the building looked open. The lights inside glowed warm and steady, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted through the air the moment he stepped out of the cab. He stretched, cracked his neck, and glanced toward the pumps beside the diner. Ancient-looking things, gasoline labels printed in red, thick hoses, metal handles, full-service relics. And yet the one nearest to him ticked upward, in quiet pulses, like it had just finished fueling someone's tank. He made a note to check if they had an inside terminal. He'd swipe and go. Quick coffee. Back on the road. The door swung open with a soft bell chime, and for a second, Miles felt like he'd walked into a photograph. Red leather booths lined the windows. Chrome stools ringed a Formica counter. The walls were covered in black and white photos of doo-wop singers, sock-hop kids, and grinning couples holding milkshakes. A jukebox in the corner played soft saxophone jazz, warbling slightly, like the vinyl had worn thin. The air was warm, almost humid, and the scent of bacon grease and cinnamon sugar hovered like a cloud. "Sit anywhere you like, hon," came a voice. Miles turned. She was standing behind the counter, smiling. The waitress was tall, slender, maybe in her late 20s, with a perfectly pinned-up bouffant and soft red lipstick that never bled past her lip line. Her blue and white uniform looked like it had never been laundered, not because it was dirty, but because it was pristine. Not a wrinkle, not a stain, not even a fade. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for a mug. Miles nodded slowly and slid into the booth nearest the jukebox. "Yeah, thanks." She walked over with smooth, practiced steps, poured from a heavy white pot, and set down a menu with rounded corners and a little grease on the spine. Her name tag read, "Melody." "Pie's fresh," she said. "Cherry and banana cream. Just came out of the fridge." He smiled. "You the owner?" "I'm just Melody," she said with a wink, and turned back toward the counter. Miles glanced at the menu. Eggs, 75 cents. Coffee, 10 cents. Hamburger with fries, $1.05. He blinked. This wasn't some nostalgic gimmick menu, with tiny font explaining modern prices at the bottom. There were no QR codes, no paper napkins, just a laminated sheet, with prices that hadn't existed since Eisenhower was in office. He looked up at the wall. A calendar hung above the soda fountain machine. July 1954. The dates were marked, notes written in old ink. One square read, "Cousin Jimmy gets home." Another, "Dance at 7." None of it was ironic. None of it new. "Hey," he called out. "You forgot to change your calendar." Melody turned and smiled. "Same as before." "Oh, that's always been there." He chuckled nervously. "I mean, it's from 1954. So am I." "Sugar," she said. He laughed, paused, and then frowned. There wasn't a trace of sarcasm in her voice. She walked over again, holding a notepad. "You look tired," she said gently. "Long road ahead." Miles nodded slowly. "Yeah, heading east, trying to beat a deadline." Melody jotted something down, then tapped her pencil twice on the edge of the table. "Well, we always like to see new faces." A man 3 booths down looked up sharply, but then turned away. His clothes were older too, a brown wool jacket, and a wide-brimmed fedora that hadn't been fashionable since the Kennedy administration. He sipped his coffee and didn't blink. Miles stared at his phone. Still no signal. He opened the map app anyway. No service, no GPS. Battery, 7%. The device dimmed as if it were powering down from something colder than the air. He slid it back into his pocket, eyes lingering on Melody, as she turned to head back behind the counter. She didn't walk like anyone he knew. She glided, and suddenly, the pie didn't matter anymore, because Miles realized he had no idea how he got here, and no idea how to leave.
Miles stared down at the half-empty mug of coffee cooling in front of him. The flavor was strong, bitter in a good way, exactly the kind of brew that old diners prided themselves on. But it wasn't the coffee that was bothering him. It was everything else. The radio behind the counter crackled softly, with a live broadcast that sounded too real. The announcer was listing baseball scores for teams that hadn't existed in 60 years, and when he switched topics, the report shifted to atomic bomb tests in the Nevada desert, delivered with the calm normalcy of a current event. Miles leaned back in the booth and looked around. Nobody else seemed fazed. The man in the fedora still sat silently in his booth, sipping from a mug, eyes on a newspaper that looked like it had yellowed naturally, not aged by design. The couple near the door was quietly sharing a plate of eggs and toast, dressed like extras from Pleasantville, cardigan sweaters, penny loafers, perfectly pressed slacks. The waitress, Melody, floated between booths, smiling and chatting like she'd known these customers all her life. And maybe she had. Miles rubbed the side of his head. Okay, he muttered, retro-themed diner. Maybe it's a tourist trap. They're leaning in hard. He reached into his coat pocket for his phone again. Still no bars. The time read 9:37 p.m., but the little circle that usually spun while syncing to a network had frozen. The battery was dropping like a rock, now at 3%.
The screen flickered, then went black. Dead. He tapped the power button. Nothing. Need a charger? Melody asked, suddenly at his side again, holding a fresh pot of coffee. He jumped a little. Yeah, actually. You got an outlet I can use? She smiled. We don't use those new things here, hon. Miles forced a chuckle. No kidding. She refilled his mug with the same grace as before. Her hands never shook. Her nails were painted cherry red, perfect, and unchipped. The scent of her perfume was light, floral, something that reminded him of the vintage bottle his grandmother kept on her dresser. You need anything else? She asked. Do you know how far I am from the next town? She tilted her head. Which direction? East. I'm trying to make it to Illy by morning. Melody's smile didn't fade, but it sharpened in a strange way. Ely, she repeated. All well. I wouldn't go out that way tonight. Why not? Road's not what it used to be. She turned and walked away without another word. Mills watched her go, something twisting in his chest. He stood up and headed for the front door, deciding to get a look at his truck, maybe recalibrate, maybe just get some air. He pushed open the door and froze. The lot was empty. No truck, no vehicles, no Cadillacs, no pickup, no Fords. The parking lot was just a wide expanse of cracked pavement under a yellow-orange moon. He stepped out slowly. The air was colder now, sharp and dry. He walked to where he had parked just 20 minutes earlier. Nothing. No tire tracks. No oil stains. It was as if he had never pulled in at all. He turned in a slow circle, heart starting to pound. The diner looked the same from the outside. Chrome walls glowing faintly under neon light, music bleeding out through old vents. But behind it, there was no road, just endless desert. He backed toward the entrance. The second his hand touched the door, it opened from the inside. Melody stood there, smiling. Forgot something? My truck, he said, voice dry. Oh, she said with a light laugh. Happens sometimes. People just forget. I didn't forget. It was right here. Her expression didn't change. Maybe sit down, she said. You seem tired. I'm not. You really should rest before the road, she added, stepping aside. Miles hesitated. Then he went back inside, because there wasn't anywhere else to go. Back in the booth, his coffee was still warm, the same spot he'd left it. The jukebox now played something softer, Mr. Sandman, by the Chordettes. The couple at the window was gone. The man in the fedora
was asleep, head tilted forward, hands wrapped around his mug. Melody stood behind the counter again, refilling a sugar jar, humming the song, as if she were born into it. Miles leaned forward. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up. "Of course. What year do you think it is?" She smiled again. "Why, it's 1954. No, really." The face didn't flinch. "You're not the first to ask," she said. Then she picked up a rag and began polishing the counter, humming to herself again. Miles sat back. The clock above the register ticked forward 1 minute, 9:38, and didn't move again. The clock stayed frozen at 9:38. Miles stared at it, watching for the tick, for the movement, for any sign of life behind the glass face and brass hands, but nothing happened. The second hand hovered over the same dash, and outside the diner's chrome-framed windows, the desert sky didn't shift, no stars moved, no clouds drifted. It was like the entire world outside had hit pause. He stood abruptly, the booth groaning under his weight. Melody didn't look up from behind the counter. He turned toward the door and shoved it open, expecting cold wind, empty gravel, anything. But the parking lot was exactly as before. The neon above the diner hummed softly. The cracked pavement glowed under the strange amber moonlight. His truck still wasn't there. Miles walked to the edge of the lot, toward where the highway should have been. But there was no road, just a dirt path that trailed off into low hills, then disappeared into shadow. He turned right, followed the dirt for 20 minutes, maybe more. The desert didn't change. The hills repeated themselves, and the air remained the same dry, silent nothing. When he turned around, sweating under his jacket, his boots dusty and throat dry, the diner was right behind him. He hadn't noticed it reappear, hadn't heard it. It was just there, as if it had always been watching. Same glowing sign, same jukebox music faint through the walls, same clock, still stuck at 9:38. He walked slowly back toward it, palms slick with sweat. Inside, the booths were full now, but not with people, with reflections. Sitting in the booths were versions of himself, sleeping, staring, eating pie in perfect mechanical bites. One version sat hunched over a newspaper, another sipped coffee, with shaking hands. None of them acknowledged him. Their eyes were cloudy, skin pale, faces tired in a way that didn't look human anymore. He backed away from the window and stumbled inside, heart racing. The air in the diner felt different, thick, damp, like breathing through cotton. Melody stood behind the counter. Same smile, same dress, only now, her lipstick was slightly smudged. Her hair wasn't as perfect. A tear ran across her collar that hadn't been there before. "Welcome back," she said sweetly. Miles didn't respond. He walked to the jukebox and yanked the plug from the wall. The music didn't stop. He pulled the power cord from the nearest outlet. The neon didn't flicker. He looked toward the kitchen door and ran for it. Melody didn't follow. "Careful back there," she said lightly. "It's easy to get lost in the pantry." He pushed through the swinging door and found himself in a hallway. Not a kitchen, not anything that belonged in a diner, just a hallway of doors, each labeled with a name. Old brass plaques tarnished with age, some scratched beyond recognition, others shining, like they'd just been screwed in. He walked down the hall. One door read, T.K. Olin's, arrived August 1959. Another, Ra Donnelly, arrived June 1972. A third, B. Chayol, arrived September 1985.
His chest tightened. He found one with a fresh plaque, still gleaming. Inja Redding, arrived September 2023. He reached for the knob. Behind him, a voice murmured, "You already checked in." He turned. No one there. Just the hallway. Just the doors. He opened his. Inside was a small room, wood-paneled, windowless. A cot, a folded wool blanket, A black and white photo on the wall, Melody smiling, with a tray of coffee in hand. A receipt sat on the nightstand. One room, Melody's place. Paid in full. His name was signed at the bottom, in his handwriting. Miles stumbled back and slammed the door shut, ran down the hallway, through the kitchen. Only now, it was filled with smoke, grease-stained walls and red-tiled floors, fryers bubbling with oil that hadn't been changed in years. He burst back into the dining room. It was empty again, except for Melody, pouring coffee into a single mug at his booth. "Have a seat," she said softly. He didn't move. "I'm not dead," he whispered. "To know," she agreed. "But you're not where you used to be, either. I want to leave." Melody looked at him with something like sadness. "No one ever stays on purpose," she said. "But leaving," she paused. "That's a bit trickier." Miles gritted his teeth. "Why me?" She smiled, warm and distant. "Maybe the road picked you. Maybe you were close enough that the walls got thin. Sometimes when people forget who they are or where they're going, this place remembers." He backed toward the door. "I'm not staying here." "Of course not," she said. He stepped outside. The desert was silent, and parked in the lot, just 20 feet away, was his truck, cab light on, keys in the ignition. He didn't wait, ran for it, climbed inside. The engine started on the first turn. He hit the gas. The diner disappeared in the rear view. But the road ahead didn't have any signs, didn't have any end, didn't even curve, just stretched flat and straight into the kind of dark that didn't feel like night. It felt like forgetting. The road ahead didn't twist, didn't rise, didn't fall, just flat black top, stretching into nothing, like it had been painted over the desert and forgotten. The stars above didn't move. The horizon never changed. Miles drove for 20 minutes, maybe an hour. He wasn't sure anymore. The clock on the dash was dead. His phone, still black, hadn't powered back on. Eventually he stopped looking at the time. Eventually he stopped pretending he hadn't been changed. The road had no signs. But after a while, a shape appeared in the distance, a small rectangle of light. Miles blinked hard. Maybe it was a rest stop, a gas station, maybe a motel. He pushed the truck faster, engine humming louder, as if it recognized the shape ahead. But as he got closer, his gut turned to ice. The light wasn't new, it was familiar. He slowed. The glowing red sign came into view, flickering slightly in the corner of his windshield. Melody's Place, open 24 hours. The chrome diner stood exactly as it had, not a dent out of place. Even the same Cadillac sat parked beside the curb. The neon buzzed in the same uneven rhythm. The same warped saxophone tune leaked from the vents. Miles slammed on the brakes and sat still for a long time. He hadn't turned around. He hadn't looped. And yet here it was, waiting, like it had been all along, with leaden limbs. He stepped out of the cab. The desert air was cold and bone dry, and yet his skin felt damp, as if something inside was sweating fear. He walked across the lot. Every step crunched with a sound he wasn't sure was gravel or bone. The door opened for him. He didn't touch it. It just eased inward with a chime. Same as always. Melody stood behind the counter, exactly as before. Her smile looked heavier now, like it had been sitting on her face too long. "You came back," she said softly. "I never left. Most don't. Once they try," she said. Miles sat down at the counter this time, not the booth. His hands trembled slightly as they touched the formica. "What is this place?" Melody looked down, refilled the sugar jar, and didn't speak. "I need to know." He said, "I'm not dead. So what am I?" She looked up. There was something distant behind her eyes now, something almost human, but older. "This place isn't heaven, and it's not hell," she said. "It's in between. A diner at the edge of the road,
And sometimes people get too close, or they get too lost. The road finds them. Is that what happened to you? Melody paused, then nodded. I was driving home after a long shift, July 14th, 1954. The road was slick from a flash flood. I never made the turn. I died 5 miles from here. She walked slowly around the counter, her shoes silent on the tile. But I loved this place. I lived in this diner my whole life. I spent more time in here than I did my own home. She ran her hand along the counter. I think that's why I came back, or why it came back for me. Miles tried to swallow. His throat was sand. Are the others like you? She shook her head. Some are lost, some are broken, a few are just echoes. People who were forgotten before they finished what they needed to do. He thought of the hallway, the doors, the names, and me. He asked, why am I here? Melody looked at him, the smile finally fading. You were tired, she said, more than you realized. You've been running for years, haven't you? Cities blurring together, miles behind you, miles ahead. No home, just the next route. He said nothing. She leaned on the counter, eyes soft. You were close, Miles, so close. There's a stretch of road where the veil's thin. You hit it. Some don't even know they do. But you did. He pressed his hands against the counter. So how do I leave? She tilted her head. You don't leave the way you came. You don't drive out. The road doesn't work like that. There has to be a way. She walked to the jukebox and pressed a button. The record skipped, then stopped. Silence fell across the diner. Then she said, you have to be remembered, or forgiven. That's the rule. He frowned. What? Melody faced him. Everyone here was forgotten, died alone, faded from memory, or they were never forgiven. For what they did, for who they became, and so they stayed. The weight of it settled on him like stone. He'd cut people off, burned bridges, ghosted family, never called his mother back, never told anyone where he was going. Not because he was cruel, just tired, always too tired. Now no one knew where he was, no one looking, no one coming.
Melody walked back behind the counter and poured him a fresh cup. This place doesn't trap people, Miles, she said gently. It just waits. He picked up the mug. It was warm, real. He took a sip, and for the first time, the bitterness didn't bite. I don't want to stay here, he whispered. Then you better figure out who might still remember you, Melody said, before they stopped trying. Behind her, the clock ticked once. 9:39. First time it had moved. Miles stared at it. The second hand shook, like something trying to restart. The jukebox hummed quietly back to life, and outside, for the first time, all night, the wind began to blow. The tick of the clock echoed through the diner, like a thunderclap. It shouldn't have mattered, just a second hand shifting forward, but it did, because it had been stuck for so long. Now, it was moving, slowly, hesitantly, like something waking from a coma. 9:39, and ticking. Miles stared at it, as if it held the key to everything. Melody had gone quiet. She stood behind the counter again, no longer smiling, no longer pouring coffee, just watching, her hands clasped gently in front of her apron. Her eyes looked softer now, tired, like someone who had watched 1,000 people come and go, and finally saw one, about to leave. I made a mistake, Miles said quietly, more to himself than her. I stopped answering calls, cut people off. I thought if I kept driving, I wouldn't have to explain myself to anyone. Melody didn't reply. Miles stood up, grabbed a napkin from the dispenser, and dug into his jacket pocket. Miraculously, the pen he always kept was still there, tucked beside his notebook. He uncapped it and began to write. His hands shook, and the ink bled a little, but the words came. Mom, I'm sorry, I disappeared. I got tired, but I never forgot you. I think I just wanted to be forgotten first. If someone finds this, please let her know. I didn't mean to vanish. I just lost the road. But I'm trying to come back." He folded the napkin once, twice, and slid it under his empty coffee mug on the counter. He looked up at Melody. "Will someone find it?" She gave a small nod. "They always do." Eventually, outside, the wind picked up. It blew dust across the cracked lot, rattled the diner sign, and stirred the flags on the gas pumps that hadn't moved since before Eisenhower. Miles turned toward the door, but it was closed now, locked. He tried the handle, rattled it. It wouldn't budge. Melody didn't move. "You still haven't decided." "Decided what?" "To leave." He frowned. "Of course I want to leave." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Or are you just afraid of staying?" The question hit deeper than it should have. He hadn't thought about it that way. Was he afraid of staying? Or of being remembered? Of having to go back and explain where he'd been? What he'd become? He glanced toward the booth, where he'd first sat, when this all began. It was empty, but something was tucked in the seat cushion. He walked over, reached down, and pulled it free. A photograph, black and white, frayed around the edges. It was him, standing in front of the diner. Same clothes, same face, but older, his eyes more hollow. Behind him, the diner looked unchanged, but in the photo, it was boarded up, closed. A no trespassing sign hung across the door. He flipped the photo over. A date was written in smudged ink. October 19th, 2042. 19 years from now. Miles felt cold. His hands trembled. Melody's voice floated to him again, gentle as falling dust. "Sometimes we get glimpses of what happens when someone stays too long." He turned to her. "That's me, still here." She nodded. "It could be. But if I leave, you take the risk of remembering who you are." The wind howled harder now. The neon sign outside buzzed erratically. The jukebox skipped, hissed, then stopped altogether. And then he heard it. A voice. Not Melody's. Not one of the frozen patrons. A child's voice, crackling through the silence, low and distant. "Dad, please come home." He spun toward the sound. It echoed faintly from the hallway in the back. The same hallway of doors, of names. He didn't wait this time. He ran toward it. The hallway stretched longer than before, lined with even more brass nameplates. Many were dim, but one at the very end, glowed faintly. M. Redding. Checked in. Checked in. He grabbed the knob. The door creaked open. Inside was the same small room, but the cot was gone. In its place, a mirror. He approached slowly, and in the reflection, he saw a hospital bed. He saw himself, pale, tubes in his arms, surrounded by machines. He was in a coma, and at his bedside, a young girl sat holding his hand. She couldn't have been older than 12. She whispered, "Please come back." Tears burned Miles's eyes. He reached toward the mirror, touched it. The surface rippled like water, and in that moment, he chose. The truck was found a week later, by highway patrol, parked on a stretch of road that hadn't existed on the maps in years. The keys were in the ignition, the engine cold, but inside, pinned beneath a mug on a counter that shouldn't have been there, was a napkin, with a message written in shaky ink. They traced the name, found an emergency contact, an old number. A woman answered. She cried when she heard, said her son had just woken up from a coma. He didn't remember much,
Just a diner in the desert. A waitress with red lipstick, and a voice that told him it was time to go. No one could find it again. But sometimes, on nights when the air goes still, and the road hums a little too softly, drivers swear they see a red neon sign flicker in the distance. Melody's Place, open 24 hours, and they keep driving. Because they remember, and that's all it takes to stay out.
Sam Latimer had never been one to take warnings seriously, especially ones that came from old men in greasy diner booths, sipping black coffee like it held back the dead. He'd heard all kinds of road tales in 20 years behind the wheel. Ghost girls, hitchhiking, phantom rigs, playing chicken, deer that walked like men, and he didn't flinch at any of them. Stories were stories. The road was the road. But that morning, at Ruby's Diner, near the Idaho-Nevada border, the air around the booths had felt colder when someone mentioned Dead Mule Pass. "You don't take that shortcut," the man with the sunburned neck had said. "Not unless you want the road to remember you." Sam had grunted, chewing on a piece of overcooked bacon. "What's up there? Ice? Washouts?" "Worse," said another, a man with a ball cap pulled low over gray eyes. "Something's up there that doesn't let go easy." Sam didn't argue. He didn't laugh either. He just paid his bill, topped off his thermos, and walked back to his Peterbilt, parked at the edge of the lot. The dispatcher had sent him an updated route that morning, a tight schedule, a heavy load of dry goods, headed for Salt Lake. With the delay from the tire blowout, 2 states back, he needed to shave off time wherever he could. Dead Mule Pass would save him 4 hours. 4 hours meant not sleeping in the cab again that night. It meant an actual bed, a hot shower, maybe even a phone call to his daughter before she fell asleep. So he drove toward the turnoff, and he took it. The road changed quickly once he left the main highway. The yellow lines thinned out, the pavement cracked, pines crept in from the edges, swallowing the sky. The sun faded faster than it should have. Within 20 minutes, the fog rolled in, not thick, but low, like it was skimming the road just to see who dared pass. The first sign was nailed to a leaning wooden post: Dead Mule Pass, 19 miles ahead. No commercial vehicles, no snow removal, no guarantees. Sam slowed slightly, thumbed off the CB, and kept going. The mountains rose like frozen waves, jagged, gray, untouched, the kind of terrain that seemed more myth than map. His GPS blinked and rerouted, trying to yank him back to the main road like a dog on a leash. Then it gave up entirely. Signal lost. He drove in silence, tires humming a deep rhythm, engine heat battling the creeping cold. Halfway up the first incline, he spotted a rig on the shoulder, dark blue, one headlight broken, no movement inside. As he passed, he noticed the side door was open, no one in the cab, no hazard lights, just sitting there like a steel coffin, waiting to be noticed. A steaming coffee cup sat in the driver's holder, the steam still twisting into the air. Sam tightened his grip on the wheel. He didn't stop. He told himself the guy had gone to take a leak in the trees, maybe broke down and hiked back. That's all. A few minutes later, his CB crackled. He hadn't turned it back on. Static at first, then a whisper, "Don't look at them." He froze. The whisper repeated, a little louder, "Don't look at them." Then silence. He reached for the power switch, but the CB was already off. The road grew narrower. A guardrail rusted through every few feet. He passed another sign, nailed to a stump, the lettering half peeled, "You are not alone." Sam laughed under his breath, a nervous kind of sound. The fog thickened. His headlights caught something ahead, a shape, low to the ground. A deer. No, not a deer. It stood on 2 legs,
then darted off into the woods too fast, too smooth. He gritted his teeth. The grade steepened. Hairpin turns stacked one on top of the next, like vertebrae. Every time he crested a bend, the same mountain stared back, unchanging. His dashboard compass spun briefly, then froze. Then came the road sign, mile 22. 10 minutes later, another sign, mile 22. 5 minutes after that, a third, mile 22. He hit the brakes, coasted to the shoulder, and killed the engine. Silence swallowed the cab, not even wind. He stepped out. The cold was sudden, sharp, unnatural. He walked to the sign, touched it. Fresh paint, new metal, like someone had just planted it. He looked back the way he came. The road behind him looked wrong, wider, cleaner, like it was waiting for him to come back. When he climbed back into the truck, something was different. The mirror had fogged, and in the condensation on the passenger window, drawn with a fingertip, were the words "Keep driving." Sam didn't write it. He looked around the cab, empty. He turned the key. The engine hesitated, then roared to life. The road ahead looked darker now, but he kept going, because stopping was beginning to feel like the most dangerous thing of all. The engine rattled louder than usual, as Sam rolled forward, like it too wanted to get this over with. Fog had swallowed the edges of the road, and now the trees pressed in closer, their shapes more like looming figures than pine. Every hairpin curve scraped the mountain's bones, with just enough shoulder for a ghost to stand on. And that's what it felt like, a place where the dead stood and watched, waiting for something that hadn't come yet. The temperature gauge on the dash dipped, then surged, then dropped again. Outside, the world looked frozen, but it wasn't winter. There hadn't been snow forecasted in weeks. No clouds, just this curtain of fog thick enough to turn the high beams useless. Each switchback came faster now, more violent, like the road had grown impatient. The CB radio crackled again. Sam hadn't touched it since the whisper, but now there was breathing, slow, measured, then a voice, low and distant. He's still bringing them, same as before. Sam jerked his head toward the speaker. What the hell? The voice didn't return. He killed the CB altogether and yanked the cord free. The radio still hummed. Static pulsed like a heartbeat, rising and falling in volume. Then the breathing stopped, and all that remained was a faint rhythmic tapping, like fingers on glass. He glanced toward the passenger window. Nothing, but something inside him said, "Don't look back." He checked the rear view. The road twisted into blackness. Then he saw it. Movement.
In the sleeper compartment behind him, he braked hard. The truck groaned as the load shifted behind him. He threw it into park, grabbed the flashlight from the glove box, and turned, heart thudding against his ribs like a warning drum. He yanked the curtain aside. Empty. Blankets. Undisturbed. No footprints. No sound. But the flashlight flickered in his hand. He sat still for a minute, two, listened, watched, and then he saw something that made his breath stop short. His duffel bag sitting on the bunk was unzipped. He hadn't opened it since Reno, and inside, poking just barely from the top, was a single leather glove, not his. He stepped out of the cab. Cold bit through his jacket, like it had teeth. The fog was thicker now, forming walls that pulsed in and out with breath-like movements. When he walked around the rig, he found fresh prints in the dirt and gravel by the trailer. Bare feet, long, deep. He followed them around the rig, then back toward the passenger door. They stopped short, vanished, like the person had simply stepped up and in. Sam's mind scrambled for reasons. Prank, exhaustion, maybe something worse, but human. Then he saw the road sign. It wasn't nailed to a post this time. It stood in the center of the road, like someone had carried it there. White paint, sharp lettering. Mile 22. Again. He'd been driving for nearly an hour since the last one, and still, mile 22, he kicked the sign over. It hit the ground with a thud, and rolled once. Beneath it, carved into the dirt, were 3 words etched by a pointed tool. "You brought it." Sam backed up. He climbed into the cab, and locked the doors, both sides, tight. The CB was glowing now, on, even though it had no power, and in the reflection of the display, he saw another truck approaching. Its headlights were dim, yellowed with age, its engine quieter than his. It moved slow, almost reverent, and pulled up beside him like it knew him. Same model, same trailer size, but it was identical, down to the license plate. He leaned out the window, stunned, but no one was in the cab. No driver, just the wheel, slowly turning itself as the truck moved forward, then stopped parallel to him. The cab light blinked on, and inside, in the driver's seat, sat a dark figure, face hidden, still as stone. Watching him, Sam slammed the window shut, and floored the gas. His rig groaned in protest, tires skidding briefly on gravel before catching grip. He didn't look back. The road twisted again, hard left, hard right. Trees rushed past like blurs. Shadows moved in the fog. He passed another wreck. A truck crushed into the side of the mountain, vines growing through its cabin. The windshield cracked inward, as though something had broken out. He hit a straightaway. Finally, his breath slowed. Then the CB spoke once more, same whisper, but now closer. "You've passed it once. You'll pass it again, but never twice as yourself." Then static. The road ahead dipped into a deep curve, and the fog broke just enough to reveal a turnoff to the right. An old gravel road. No signs, no markers, but a faint light flickered between the trees, like a lantern swinging in the dark. Sam kept going. He didn't slow, didn't wonder, didn't look, because some roads don't ask permission. They just take what they're owed. Sam hadn't blinked in miles. His eyes stung. His jaw clenched so tight it felt fused to his skull. The road was still winding, but the curves had stopped making sense. They doubled back on themselves, spiraled inward like the mountain wanted to fold in on him. And the fog, Jesus, the fog, no longer floated. It pulsed, thick and wet, sucking in the light from his headlights like a sponge. Everything around him moved wrong, even the trees. They leaned in, not with wind, but with intention. The GPS screen had long since gone black. The compass on his dash spun lazily, like it didn't care anymore. Then came the thump, a heavy bang against the rear trailer wall. Sam jolted in his seat. He knew that sound. Cargo shifting, something moving that shouldn't be. But the trailer had been locked and sealed at the last depot. He checked his mirrors. The fog swirled behind him like breath. Another thump, closer to the cab this time. He slowed and pulled to the shoulder, or what he thought was the shoulder. The edge of the road looked like every other part of the pass now: gravel, black roots, mist that curled and whispered without wind. Sam stepped out, flashlight in hand. The cold slammed into him again, stronger than before, like it had bones. He walked the length of the trailer. The metal skin of it glistened faintly, with moisture. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, in bursts, batteries flickering, despite being new this morning. He reached the back. The lock was still in place, but it looked newer than before, like it had been replaced. With a shaking hand, he undid the latch and pulled the door open. The trailer was supposed to be stacked with dry goods, pallets of cereal, packaged snacks. That's what the manifest said. That's what he signed for. But it was empty. No pallets, no shrink wrap, just space, except for the walls. The inside of the trailer was covered in handprints,
hundreds of them, some small, some massive, some smeared downward, like someone had been dragged and carved into the metal with what must have been fingernails or something sharper, were names, dozens of them, each scratched into the wall in jagged letters, some overlapping, some fading. And Kelly, 1991, Donnie C. Help, Walt, still alive, don't stop. And at the very bottom, etched deeper than all the others, Latimer, again, his own name, same spelling, same shape. Sam staggered backward and dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the trailer floor with a hollow sound, finally settling against the far wall. In that flickering light, something moved in the corner. He didn't wait. He slammed the doors shut, relocked them, and backed away until his legs hit the cab steps. As he scrambled back into the truck, the CB radio lit up. No static this time, just a voice, clear and tired. Cargo secured. Sam reached to shut it off again, but it was already unplugged. He threw the truck into gear and drove.
Didn't think, didn't stop. The road unfolded ahead, like a bad memory trying to finish itself. The signs came faster now, one every mile, except they didn't make sense anymore. Mile 33, mile 28, mile 41. Then one that simply read, mile, you know. His knuckles were white on the wheel. The fog thinned for a moment and revealed another truck parked just ahead, jackknifed across the lane. He slowed and stopped. The driver's side door was open. No one inside, but on the seat, lit perfectly by his high beams, sat a clipboard with a manifest. He stepped out, unable to help himself, and approached. The clipboard read, Manifest, Dead Mule Freight Driver, S. Latimer Cargo. The unclaimed. He turned the sheet. On the back was a list of stops. All of them were coordinates. No towns, no road names, just latitudes and longitudes. All marked completed, except one, last delivery, Turin. When ready, the truck behind him creaked. Something moved inside the sleeper, slow, heavy. Sam didn't turn around. He grabbed the clipboard and ran back to his own rig. The moment he closed the door, the CB hissed again. Route confirmed. You've been here before. You'll be here again. He ripped the device from the dash. Nothing changed. His phone, long dead, lit up once, but instead of a home screen, it showed an old photo, a blurry image of him standing beside a truck, smiling. The timestamp read, October 17th, 1997, Dead Mule Pass. He hadn't been here before, had he? His head swam. The cold crept in again, and far down the road, in the next curve where the mountain turned black and bottomless, a light flickered, a figure waved, trying to flag him down. Sam put the truck in drive. He didn't wave back. Sam didn't slow, not for the figure in the road, not for the curve that looked like a cliff edge dressed in fog, and not for the thundering sound behind his trailer. The wheels screamed, the weight shifted, but the headlights cut through just enough to show blacktop still ahead. No guardrails, no signs, just the ghostly suggestion of a road, and a man trying not to think about what was in his rig, or what had written his name inside it. The clipboard sat on the passenger seat now. Sam hadn't meant to bring it, but there it was. The manifest, his name printed on the top, like it belonged there, as if he'd always worked for Dead Mule Freight. He reached for it with a trembling hand, and flipped to the second page. It was blank. Thin letters began to type across the paper, slowly, one line at a time. There was no pen, no pressure, just ink, appearing like breath on glass. Mile 33, prepare for ascent. You are nearing delivery point. Do not exit vehicle. He dropped the clipboard like it burned. The CB came to life again, even though he'd ripped it out twice. Keep eyes forward. Don't remember them yet. Then silence, not even static.
The dashboard lights flickered. The gas gauge spun like a clock before settling below empty, even though he'd just filled up 2 hours ago. The radio hissed. The vents blew air that smelled like old pine needles and moldy carpet. The fog lifted for just a second, and Sam saw a turnout to his right, a narrow gravel path, barely wide enough for a single truck. It was lined with lanterns, old iron ones, hanging from crooked poles. They were lit. He felt his hands turning the wheel before he meant to. The truck moved off the main road and onto the turnout. Gravel cracked beneath the tires. The headlights dimmed, like they were being swallowed. Every instinct in him screamed to reverse, to back down, to unmake this turn. But there was no going back, not on Dead Mule Pass. The turnout narrowed until the trees touched the sides of the trailer. Sam slowed to a crawl, then stopped. In front of him stood a man in a uniform, crisp and untouched by time, the kind old railway workers used to wear. His cap was tilted, his face pale and featureless, just eyes, dark and hollow. He raised one arm slowly and motioned forward. Sam rolled down his window. "I don't have anything to deliver," he called. The man didn't speak, just pointed at the trailer. The clipboard beside Sam vibrated once. He looked down. The page had changed again. Cargo, memory destination, retrieval zone. Do not look inside until signal. He looked back up. The man was gone. Only fog now. Sam moved forward. The road opened into a clearing, circular, wide enough for 2 rigs to turn side by side, but no road beyond, just cliffs, and them. Lining the clearing were others like him, trucks parked in silence, each one older than the last, some rusted through, some skeletal paint peeled away in long strips, and beside each cab stood a figure, drivers, but not. They didn't move, didn't blink, just watched him arrive. Sam parked at the center. The trailer behind him shuddered. Once, then again. He reached for the door handle, then stopped, because from the corner of his mirror, one of the drivers was walking toward him, not fast, just steady. The others remained still. The man approached the driver's side and stopped a foot from the door. His face was gray, his eyes were stitched shut. He raised a hand and pressed something flat against the glass. It was a photograph. Sam leaned closer. It was him, again, but this time, different. In the photo, he was young, maybe 25, standing beside a truck at the summit of a mountain, his arm around a man in uniform, the same uniform the stitched man now wore. On the back, written in sharp black ink, "Don't forget what you carried." Sam reached for the photo, but the man was gone. Only the photo remained. It slipped from the window into the cab. Sam picked it up. His head throbbed. Memories tried to claw their way up. Long nights, strange jobs, a run in '97 that didn't end where it started. He turned the key again. The trailer lock snapped open on its own. He looked in the side mirror. The door at the back of the trailer had opened itself, and from inside, a shape began to step down. Not a person, not exactly a child's silhouette, but tall, unmoving, face hidden in shadow. Then a second, then a third. They walked past him in complete silence, formed a line, and walked straight into the mist, toward the cliff, one by one. Sam tried to move, couldn't, tried to yell, nothing came out.
The final figure stopped by his door. A girl. She looked up at him, and for the first time in hours, someone spoke with a human voice. I remember now. Then she followed the others into the dark. The fog closed behind her like a closing door, and the CB whispered once more. Final delivery accepted. The clipboard lit up. Manifest, complete driver, released return route, available, but Sam didn't drive yet, because he knew there was one more curve ahead, and the road wasn't finished with him just yet. Sam didn't start the truck right away. The figures had vanished into the fog, swallowed without sound, and the clearing had gone still again. His hands remained frozen on the wheel, muscles locked, breath shallow. Somewhere deep in his chest, a cold weight pressed against his ribs. Not fear, exactly, but something more permanent, like a memory returning too late to change anything. The CB stayed quiet. The clipboard no longer glowed. His rig sat alone now. The other trucks still lined the perimeter of the clearing like gravestones, but their cabs were empty. Their drivers had stepped away, or maybe they'd been gone all along. He turned the key. The engine started with a reluctant groan. The fuel gauge twitched and returned to full. The dashboard lights steadied. The fog receded slightly, revealing a narrow path cut into the far side of the mountain. It hadn't been there before. It looked new, or old, or remembered. He shifted into drive and rolled forward. The gravel crunched beneath his tires, the headlights illuminating only 10 feet ahead at a time. The path wound upward at first, then leveled out into what looked like flat highway. The trees fell away. The sky opened. Stars blinked faintly overhead, the first he'd seen since before the detour. For a moment, it felt normal, but only for a moment, because as he looked to his left, over the side of the pass, Sam saw what lay below, a ravine, deep, wide, and littered with the shattered wrecks of dozens of semis, some overturned, some burned out, some half consumed by trees and earth. Every one of them was crushed in a way that said they never got back down. And there in the center of the valley laid a single rig still intact. The paint was a dull red, the license plate smeared with time. But it was his, same truck, same number, same bumper dent. Sam gripped the wheel harder, knuckles bone white. The road ahead dipped slightly, a soft curve, and as he turned into it, the headlights briefly caught something standing at the edge of the shoulder. A man, in uniform, hand raised in a half wave, eyes stitched shut. Same figure from the clearing, same one from the photo. Sam passed him without slowing down. The road descended gradually after that, and the fog finally began to thin for good. The trees fell away. Signs returned, yellow ones, reflective, real. Exit 214, Interstate 15 North, the kind of sign you only see when the world is normal again. But the unease didn't lift, not fully. The CB hissed once more, just once, and a new voice came through. Familiar, too familiar. It was his own, and it said calmly, "Delivery complete, manifest closed, awaiting next assignment." Then silence. No static. No interference. The screen stayed black. After that, he drove without stopping for another hour. By the time he hit the main interstate, the sun was beginning to rise, pale pink across the horizon, warm light cutting through the cab windows. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him. Alive again. Battery 68%. Signal 3 bars. The screen flashed with missed calls. A voicemail. He hesitated, then played it. It was his daughter's voice, younger than he remembered. "Hey Dad, just checking in. I know you're busy. A pause. I had a weird dream. You were lost, not like on a map, but like, gone. Anyway, call me when you get this." Sam didn't cry, not right away. He just pulled over to the shoulder of I-15, parked the truck, and sat still, while the morning climbed over the horizon. The clipboard was still on the seat. He flipped to the last page. Just one line remained, printed in small gray type. "Sometimes, the weight isn't what you haul, it's what you forget to unload." He tore the page out, crumbled it, tossed it onto the dash. Then he reached for his phone, pressed call, and this time, when her voice came through the line, he didn't miss it. "Somewhere, deep in the Nevada mountains, there's a turn that's not marked. Ditchard's laws, not Eep, not by signs, not by map. A road where time forgets itself, where trucks go in, but don't always come back.
A place that remembers names longer than people do. Locals call it Dead Mule Pass, but they say it used to have another name, something older. Now and then, someone still takes it, usually someone chasing time, chasing a shortcut, chasing something they think they've lost, and sometimes they return, but never the same, and never alone.
The snow had been coming down for hours, smothering every trace of the old highway and painting the landscape in relentless white. Dan's wipers beat back and forth, scraping out a porthole through the icy mess, but he could barely see the sign when it appeared, "Rest stop 1 mile." Relief crept into his tired shoulders. He was running on fumes, caffeine, and old country radio, and the thought of stepping out into the storm for even a moment made him shudder. But the fuel gauge blinked red, and his eyelids felt like lead. He needed a break, somewhere to sit out the storm and let the world go quiet for just a little while. The rest stop appeared out of nowhere, a blocky building with a faded red roof and flickering neon. A handful of trucks were parked haphazardly out front, their windows frosted and dark. No one moved outside. Dan pulled in beside a salt-crusted van, cut the engine, and listened to the silence. The wind howled around him, shaking the cab and moaning against the door. For a moment he considered just sleeping right there, wrapped up in his jacket, but the cold was already crawling in, seeping through the seams, biting at his toes. Inside, the rest stop was warmer, but no more inviting. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The place smelled of old coffee, cleaning fluid, and something sharp and metallic. The vending machines were half empty, the coffee pot on the counter bubbling with something that looked more like oil than any drink Dan would risk. Still, he was grateful for the four walls and the roof. He walked the length of the building, past rows of empty booths and a single ancient pinball machine. No one was at the counter. The only sign of life was a battered radio behind the register, whispering a static-laced ballad. He cleared his throat, called out, "Hello, anyone here?" But his voice just echoed back to him, lonely as the wind outside. He poured himself a cup of coffee anyway, wincing at the taste, and settled into a booth by the window. Snow battered the glass, thickening every minute. Dan stared at the empty parking lot, watched the snow pile higher on the hoods of the cars, and let his mind drift. He thought about his daughter, back in Kansas, the way she'd waved from the porch that morning, her red scarf whipping in the wind. He'd promised he'd be home in time for her birthday. He just needed to get through the night. A sound broke the silence, a low, steady humming, coming from the back of the building. Dan looked up, confused. It wasn't the radio, wasn't the coffee pot. It was deeper, colder, like the vibration of a distant engine, or the drone of bees in a hollow tree. He tried to ignore it, sipping his coffee, but the sound grew louder, an icy thrum that seemed to rattle his bones. Something about it made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He told himself it was nothing, just the building settling, or the old freezer keeping the sodas cold. But when he glanced down the hallway, he saw a thin curl of vapor drifting from beneath a heavy steel door, marked storage. The humming was louder now, an electric pulse that seemed to tug at him, demanding attention. Dan set his cup down, stood, and walked toward the back. The door was ice-rimmed, frost spreading in delicate veins across the metal. He touched the handle, and yanked his hand back, the cold biting deep. Still, something pulled at him, a nagging sense of worry, or maybe just the need to break the boredom of the storm. He wrapped his sleeve around his hand, gripped the handle, and tugged. The door creaked open, groaning on old hinges. A wave of freezing air blasted his face, stinging his eyes, and making him gasp. The humming was deafening in here, echoing off tile and metal. Inside,
Rows of shelves stood stacked with frozen goods, boxes of meat and bags of ice, their labels obscured by a thick rime of frost. And then he saw her. At first he thought she was a mannequin, left over from some cruel prank. A girl, maybe 10 or 11, sat cross-legged atop a box of frozen peas, her hair dark and tangled, her skin bone pale against the cold. She wore a thin blue dress, and nothing else. No shoes, no jacket. Her arms were wrapped around her knees. Frost clung to her lashes and eyebrows, glittering like tiny stars. She was smiling. It wasn't the vacant, glassy smile of a doll or a sleepwalker, but something calm, almost knowing. Her eyes, startlingly blue, sharp and alert, locked onto his. For a heartbeat, Dan couldn't move. He felt a jolt of panic, ice water in his veins, the urge to turn and run, but he couldn't look away. "Hey," he managed, his voice rough and uncertain. "Are you okay? What are you doing in here?" The girl cocked her head, still smiling. "Waiting," she said, her voice as clear as a bell. "I'm waiting for someone." Dan stepped forward, breath fogging in the air. "You'll freeze to death. You have to come out." She shook her head, her smile never wavering. "I can't leave yet. Not until it's safe." He looked around, desperate for answers. Any sign of parents, staff, anyone. The only sound was the endless, frozen hum. The girl's eyes didn't leave his. "Don't open the door too wide," she whispered suddenly. "The cold keeps them out." A shiver traced Dan's spine. "Keeps who out?" But she just hugged her knees tighter, still smiling, as if she knew something he didn't, something he wasn't ready to understand. The wind howled outside, and in the silence of the freezer, Dan felt a chill deeper than any storm. Dan stood frozen at the threshold, hands still gripping the icy edge of the freezer door, unable to process the reality in front of him. The humming from the unit thrummed through his bones, matching the thumping of his heart. The girl's words hung in the cold air. "Don't open the door too wide. The cold keeps them out." For a moment, he wondered if he'd finally cracked from exhaustion, that this was all a strange dream conjured by the snow and his own loneliness. But the girl's breath puffed visibly, and her blue eyes glimmered with an eerie awareness that made the hair on his arms stand on end. He took a cautious step forward, trying to ignore the ache in his knees from the cold seeping into his bones. "Listen, sweetheart," he tried, voice gentle. "There's a blizzard outside. You can't stay in here. Where are your parents?" The girl's smile faded only a fraction. "They're not here anymore," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "They left a long time ago." A cold dread crept into Dan's stomach. He looked over his shoulder, half expecting someone to appear in the hallway behind him. A parent, a store clerk, even a police officer. But the corridor was empty, bathed in flickering yellow light. No footsteps, no voices. He felt suddenly exposed, as if something watched from beyond the walls, waiting for him to make the wrong move. He knelt down, trying not to alarm her. "I'm Dan. Can you tell me your name?" She watched him for a long, silent moment, then said, "Lila." "Okay, Lila. Can I get you a blanket? Or maybe we can go to the front, where it's warmer." Lila shook her head, dark hair spilling over her thin shoulders. "If I leave, they'll know." Dan frowned. "Who will know?" She only whispered, "The ones outside." She cast a glance toward the tiny frosted window in the corner of the freezer. Snow pressed against the glass in thick swirling waves, as if trying to force its way in. The uneasy feeling gnawed at Dan's insides. He stood, rubbing his arms for warmth, scanning the freezer for anything useful. He found a faded wool blanket, draped over a stack of boxes, and offered it to her, but she only pulled her knees tighter to her chest. Outside the freezer, a sharp rattle echoed through the rest stop, like the front door opening, then slamming shut. Dan's head jerked up, nerves on edge. He moved back down the hallway, shivering, as he left the cocoon of cold. His boots squeaked on the linoleum,
and every shadow felt a shade too dark. As he reached the main room, he saw a figure just inside the entrance, a woman, bundled in a heavy coat and scarf, her gloved hands dusted with snow. She looked old, her face drawn and pale, eyes sharp, with a strange hunger. She spotted Dan and smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made his skin crawl. "Evening," she called out, her voice gravelly and deep. "Terrible night to be out, isn't it?" Dan mustered a polite nod. "Yeah, storm's gotten bad." The woman stomped her boots, eyes flicking past him, scanning the rest stop. "You alone here?" she asked. He hesitated. "Just me and the staff, somewhere in back, I guess." The woman stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his face. "I'm looking for someone," she said. "A little girl, my daughter. She ran off earlier. Have you seen her?" Dan's heart skipped. He thought of Lila's warning, "Don't let them in." "Can't say I have," he lied, forcing a casual tone. "You try the other side of the highway." She stared at him a moment longer, as if trying to read his thoughts. "No," she said at last. "I'm sure she's here. She likes the cold, always did, even as a baby. It's like she belongs to it." Dan felt sweat trickle down his back. Despite the chill, he needed answers, but everything in his gut screamed not to trust this woman. "What's her name?" he asked, testing her. "Lila," the woman replied instantly. Dan managed to keep his face blank. "How long's she been missing?" The woman's smile widened. "Long enough," she murmured. "Could I trouble you for some coffee? It's been a long walk." He nodded, forcing himself into motion. As he poured her a cup, his mind raced. Lila said her parents were gone. This woman's story made no sense. Her clothes looked wrong for the storm, too clean, her boots dry, no frost on her scarf. Every detail seemed a little off, like she'd stepped in from somewhere other than the snow outside. He handed her the cup, watching her sip, noticing how she never seemed to blink. "If I see her, I'll let you know," he offered, voice steady. The woman leaned in, lowering her voice. "If you do, don't let her leave. It's not safe out there. Not for her, not for anyone." Dan's nerves jangled. He nodded, excused himself, and hurried back down the hall toward the freezer. He felt the woman's eyes burning into his back as he went. At the storage door, he paused, listening, half expecting footsteps behind him, half expecting to hear Lila's voice. Instead, he heard only the freezer's endless, humming lullaby, and faintly, Lila's words repeating in his mind. "Don't let them in. The cold keeps them out." Dan hesitated, glancing back down the hallway, heart thudding. The storm raged on, but inside, a different chill was settling in, a cold that had nothing to do with the snow. Dan lingered at the freezer door, one ear cocked to the hall, another to the humming cold within. The rest stop felt suddenly smaller, walls closing in, air heavier with secrets. He pressed his palm to the icy metal, steadying himself, and eased the door open, just enough to slip inside. Lila hadn't moved. She hugged her knees, face illuminated by the freezer's ghostly light, blue eyes locked on the door. "She's here, isn't she?" she asked, voice so quiet, it barely rose above the drone. Dan nodded, crouching beside her, the chill seeping through his jeans. "She says she's your mother." Lila shivered, but her smile had vanished. "She's not. She looks like my mother, but she isn't. She comes every winter. Sometimes she finds a way in. If she gets me, I won't remember who I am." Dan's mind reeled. "What do you mean? Has this happened before?" Lila nodded, hair trailing like a dark cloud around her face. "Last year, she almost opened the door. I hid in here, where it's cold. She hates the cold. It's the only place she can't touch me." She leaned forward, eyes burning. "Don't trust her, Dan. She's not looking for me. She's looking for you too." Dan wanted to protest, wanted to say it was impossible, but the facts wouldn't stack right in his head. The woman's story was wrong. Her boots, her voice, her hunger,
None of it made sense. He rubbed his hands together, trying to warm them. What is she, Lila? Lila hesitated, words trembling out. She's the snow. She's the night. She takes people who get lost or cold. She takes them until they forget themselves. Some call her the Frost Mother, but she's not a mother. Not really. A thud echoed from the hallway. A deliberate, heavy step. Dan's heart leapt. He peered through the frosted window. In the freezer door, the woman's silhouette drifted past the booths, pausing at each, moving with inhuman patience.
He turned back to Leela. How long have you been hiding? She hugged her knees tighter. Since last winter, I got stuck here with my dad. He went out for help and didn't come back. I stayed where it was cold, so she couldn't get in. I think she waits for people like me, people nobody comes looking for. Dan's mouth went dry. Has anyone ever helped you before? Leela shrugged, her face flickering with an ancient sadness. Some try, some go with her, some never make it out. You shouldn't have stopped, Dan. Dan clenched his jaw. I wasn't going to leave you. From the hall, the woman's voice cut the quiet, almost playful. Leela, it's time to come out. I brought you your favorite scarf. Aren't you cold in there? Leela shrank back, her breath coming quicker. Don't answer, she whispered. Dan moved to block her view of the door, feeling the cold gnaw at his back. He peered through the gap, watching the woman pace. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim, seeking, hunting. She moved like she had all night, like time meant nothing to her. Dan's gaze darted around the freezer. He needed answers. Shelves of frozen food, a mop, a stack of dusty newspapers wedged between two boxes. He fumbled with the papers, heart hammering. Headlines jumped out. GRL vanishes in winter storm. Another child lost on Highway 38. Local legend of the Frost Mother. Photos of missing children, some faded with age. Leela's face among them, hair longer, but the same piercing eyes. He turned to her, throat tight. How long have you been here, really? Leela closed her eyes. Long enough. Time doesn't work the same here. She's always searching, always hungry. If you see her eyes, if she catches you in the warm, you forget where you were going. You forget everything. The freezer door rattled. Dan leaped up, shoving his shoulder against it, heart pounding. The woman's shadow loomed on the other side, her voice a silky whisper. Dan, open up. It's cold out here, isn't it? You should let me in. I can help the girl. I can help you too. Dan's breath clouded. He looked to Leela. What do I do? She answered with terror and certainty. Don't let her in. No matter what she says, she'll promise you warmth, home, anything you want, but it's not real. She takes your memories, then your face. Something primal flickered in Dan, a survival instinct that cut through doubt. He looked down at Leela, then at the frost webbing over the glass. The woman's outline pressed closer, a hand smoothing over the door, as if she could sense them inside. I know you're there, she sang. I know what you're hiding. Dan grabbed the mop handle, readying himself. If she gets in, will she leave? Leela shook her head. Not until she takes someone. A sudden silence fell, heavier than the storm, heavier than fear. Dan stared at the frozen window, at the shape moving behind the ice. His mind flashed with images of all the people who must have sat where he was now, shivering, hoping the cold could save them. He swallowed hard, knuckles white on the handle. Outside, the woman's voice returned, lower now, drifting through the keyhole like a winter wind. You can't stay in there forever, Dan. The storm will end, and you'll have to choose, the cold or me. Inside the freezer, Leela looked up at him, hope and dread warring in her eyes. You have to be strong, Dan. She can't stand the cold, but neither can you. Just a little longer. Dan nodded, his breath catching in the frost. The humming filled his skull,
But beneath it he heard something else, the slow scrape of nails on metal, a patient hunger waiting for warmth, for weakness, for a door to open just an inch too far. Dan's grip tightened on the mop handle as the freezer door rattled again, harder this time. Frost flaked off and fell to the floor, brittle as glass. He pressed his shoulder against the door, feeling the cold seep into his bones and burn. The humming freezer vibrated through him, numbing his fingers, but the presence outside was anything but dull. He could feel her there, a heat that pressed through the cracks and dared him to falter. The woman's voice seeped through the slit in the door. Too warm, too familiar. You're both going to freeze in there. Why don't you open up? Just for a second. I'll keep you safe. I promise. Her tone turned syrupy, almost a lullaby. Dan, you're tired. You want to rest. Let me take care of you. Let me take care of her. Isn't that what you want? Dan shook his head, teeth chattering. Don't listen, Leela whispered. Her lips were nearly blue now, but her eyes burned with stubborn fire. She can sound like anyone. She's taken so many voices. She just wants you to open the door. She needs an invitation. Who is she really? Leela. Dan pressed, desperate for any anchor to reality. What does she want? Leela's breath fogged in the freezing air. She wants to come in from the cold. She wants to be warm, but she can't not unless someone lets her. If she gets close, she takes things: your name, your memories, your warmth. Sometimes she takes your face. Then you walk out into the snow and never come back. Dan tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. He heard shuffling, the scuff of heavy boots, or was it bare feet, against the tile outside. The woman began humming softly, a tune so old and familiar, it made Dan ache. For home, for his daughter's little hands clutching his own, for sun and warmth, and ordinary life. He gritted his teeth, fighting back the tears that prickled his frozen skin. He thought about charging the door, shoving past her, dragging Leela with him. But he knew, deep down, that there was nowhere safe except here in the cold. Every instinct screamed to run, but Leela's warning echoed in his head. If you open the door, she gets in. The woman's voice grew sharper, angry. You can't stay in there forever. You'll freeze, both of you. Come out, and I'll make it quick. Or stay, and you'll watch her die in front of you. Is that what you want, Dan? He looked at Leela, her small hands clenched, her face pinched with cold and fear, and something older. Don't listen, she rasped. She always says that. She wants you to feel guilty, to let her in. You have to wait her out.
The humming grew louder, filling the freezer with a vibrating cold that reached his marrow. Dan's mind began to drift. He saw memories, half-formed and floating, of laughter and light and summers gone by. It would be so easy to let go, to just let the cold take him, or to open the door and step into the warmth that the woman promised. But then the humming changed. It warped, turned into a horrible scraping sound, as if claws dragged along the outside of the freezer. Dan pressed harder against the door, praying it would hold. A sudden crack echoed through the tiny room. The lights flickered and buzzed, shadows stretching across the frost. Dan thought he saw the woman's silhouette shift, growing taller, limbs spider-long, hair writhing in a wind that didn't exist. Her eyes glowed, two embers burning through the icy window. You're almost out of time, she whispered, and her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Lila shuddered, tears freezing on her cheeks. She's getting desperate. She'll try anything now. She can't come in, unless you let her. But if you fall asleep, if you forget, she can slip inside your dreams. Dan slapped his own face, trying to stay awake, trying to focus on the pain and the cold. Talk to me, Lila. Keep me here. Tell me about your dad. Tell me something real. Lila's voice wavered, but she began to speak, a slow trickle of words about her father, a laugh, like thunder, hands that smelled of pine sap, the way he always knew how to build a fire in any storm. Dan clung to her stories, like a lifeline, repeating his own, his daughter's first steps, his wife's laugh, the dog that chased rabbits across the yard. Each word beat back the numbing cold, reminding him of who he was. Outside, the woman howled, a shriek that rattled the shelves and made frost bloom across the walls. The door shook in its frame, the glass spider webbing with cracks, but still, it held. The storm outside battered the rest stop with relentless fury. The humming freezer was all that separated them from the monster at the door. Dan squeezed Lila's hand, feeling her pulse, a tiny stubborn rhythm. "I won't let her in," he whispered. "I promise." The woman's silhouette faded back into the shadows. The pressure lifted, just for a moment, and the humming settled back into its old steady rhythm. Dan and Lila pressed close, shivering together, waiting for the darkness to pass. But in that silence, they both knew it wasn't over. The dawn was still far away, and the cold was the only thing keeping them safe from the nightmare in the storm. The darkness inside the freezer felt deeper than ever, as if the storm outside had seeped into the very walls, thickening the air with fear and ice. Dan's hands ached from clutching the mop handle, his knuckles stiff and white. He could feel Lila's breath fluttering against his arm, each inhale shallower than the last. Her eyelids drooped, her lips tinged with blue, and Dan knew they were running out of time. The cold that kept them safe was now their greatest enemy. Somewhere beyond the door, the woman's shadow stretched across the linoleum, patient as the grave. For a while there was only silence, broken by the hum of the freezer and the hiss of wind sifting snow against the walls. But then the voice came again, softer now, as though the woman knew exhaustion was setting in. "You can't hold on forever, Dan," she crooned. "You're not made for the cold. Why not rest for a while? Why not let the warmth in? It would feel so good." He pressed his forehead to the frozen steel, the pain anchoring him. "Don't listen," he whispered to himself, but the lure in her words was like honey. Each promise of warmth gnawed at him, an ache deeper than frostbite. He glanced at Lila, her blue eyes glassy with sleep. She blinked up at him, voice a ragged thread. "You have to lock the door, Dan, all the way, even if I ask you to open it, even if I start to forget." "What do you mean?" he asked, dread curling in his gut. Lila tried to smile. "She'll try anything. She'll even sound like me. But you can't let her in, not until morning." Tears welled and froze on her lashes. "If you let her in, neither of us will be here when the sun rises." He pulled her closer, using his body to shield her from the worst of the chill. He tried to focus on his memories, the color of his daughter's scarf, the taste of hot coffee at sunrise, the rough scrape of his dog's tongue on his palm, anything to remember who he was, to keep himself from drifting. But the fatigue was a living thing creeping into his thoughts, dulling the edges of his resolve. The lights overhead flickered, and for a moment, Dan thought he saw another figure inside the freezer, standing just behind him. He spun, breath catching, but there was only empty space and rows of icy shelves. The hum of the freezer grew louder, pulsing with every heartbeat. A new voice slipped through the crack beneath the door. Lila's own voice, perfect in pitch and fear. "Dan, please let me out. I'm scared. It's too cold. Please." He stared at the girl huddled in his arms, who shook her head, eyes pleading. "That's not me," she mouthed. Dan squeezed his eyes shut, heart pounding. The voices doubled, then tripled, echoing off the frozen walls. The woman's, Lila's, even his own, each promising something he wanted, something he feared. The chill in his limbs deepened. His mind started to float, like he was half asleep, half underwater. Suddenly,
Lila's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Remember who you are," she hissed. "Don't let go, not even for a second." Dan drew a ragged breath, forcing his eyes open. "I'm here," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I'm here." The pressure on the other side of the door built to a fever pitch, fists pounding, nails scraping, voices rising in a chorus of longing and grief. The glass panel in the door splintered, tiny spiderweb cracks spreading outward with every blow. Dan scrambled to jam a broken shelf against the handle, his frozen muscles barely obeying. "I know you're tired," the woman whispered, her mouth pressed to the crack, her breath steaming through. "Just open the door, Dan. 1 minute of warmth, and all this ends." The temptation was a living thing, but Lila clung to him, anchoring him to the moment. "You promised," she breathed. "You wouldn't let her in." With the last of his strength, Dan forced himself to stay awake, reciting every memory he could conjure. His daughter's name, his father's old jokes, the songs he used to hum on long drives. The humming grew harsher, the wind outside howling in reply, but inside he focused on the tiny body beside him, the life he'd sworn to protect. As the sky outside began to pale, the voices faded, one by one. The pounding stopped, only the wind remained, moaning low and bitter around the building. Dan blinked, unsure how much time had passed. The lights flickered back to steady life, illuminating the frost that coated every surface. He peered through the broken glass. The hallway beyond was empty, no footprints in the new snow, no shadows but his own. Dan staggered to his feet, lifting Lila in his arms. She was light as air, her skin cold but her pulse still fluttering. They stepped out into the dawn. The rest stop was silent, ghostly in the blue light. In the parking lot, Dan's truck was half buried, but the storm had passed. He looked back once at the freezer, the frost on the door, the echo of a smile traced in the ice. Lila squeezed his hand. "You remembered," she said, voice thin but certain. Dan nodded, leading her into the sunrise, the cold finally lifting from his bones. Behind them, the rest stop stood silent, the memory of the night sealed in frost, waiting for the next traveler, who might mistake the warmth of a voice for a promise, and the smile of a girl for safety in the storm.
The clock on the dashboard glowed 1:11 a.m. Then the road ahead was an endless dark river. "Jimmy, big rig." Morton leaned forward, rubbing tired eyes, the CB radio murmuring low static in the cab. Rain swept across his windshield in silver streaks, blurring the world into smudged shadows and neon reflections from his instrument panel. He had another 100 miles of blacktop before the next real town, and the coffee in his thermos had gone cold an hour back. Out here, everything felt hollow, mile markers drifting past like ghosts, headlights few and far between. Trucking at night was always lonely, but tonight the loneliness cut deeper, almost as if the highway itself was holding its breath. Jimmy cranked up the heater, glancing at the gauges, oil pressure steady, temp normal, fuel a little low but manageable. He'd done this route 1,000 times, knew every twist, every dip where deer might bolt across the asphalt. The CB sputtered, then fell silent. Jimmy thumbed the mic. "Breaker 19. Anyone riding the wire out near mile 78? Come back." Static answered. He shrugged, returned the mic to its cradle, and shifted in his seat. Up ahead, the rain hammered harder, drumming on the roof and hood with a hungry sound. The highway gleamed like an oil slick, reflecting the angry red blink of his dash lights. A voice cut through the static, unexpected, crisp despite the distance. "Big rig, your engine's bleeding." Jimmy jerked upright, heart thudding. He scanned his mirrors, checked his gauges again. All normal. He reached for the mic, hesitating. That voice wasn't any regular on this stretch, didn't sound like anyone he knew. It was genderless, young, and close, like someone whispering just behind his seat. He clicked the mic, voice steady. "Say again, you got a copy on Big Rig?" Over. A beat of silence. Then softer. "Your engine's bleeding, Jimmy. You should pull over." He twisted in his seat, searching the darkness for headlights, tail lights, anything. Only the black road, and the snaking line of his own running lights in the side mirror. "You trying to spook me?" he called, a smile forced onto his face, though his skin crawled. "Engine's fine. Gotta do better than that, if you're bored out here tonight." A whisper, as if the wind itself had learned to talk. "You can't see it, but it's there." He snapped off the CB, not wanting to play along with someone's late-night prank, but he couldn't shake the voice. He checked the mirrors again, hand trembling. The rain was easing now, a thick fog, curling up from the ditches and swallowing the edges of the world. 10 miles slipped by, each more uneasy than the last. He kept glancing at the gauges, half expecting one to twitch. Nothing. Still, he rolled down the window a crack, sniffing the air for anything burnt or sharp, but all he smelled was rain and old upholstery. He passed an empty rest stop, a broken vending machine glowing lonely blue in the dark, and a pickup truck with all its windows fogged over, no sign of life inside. He thought about stopping, just for a coffee, just to get out of the truck and breathe, but something in him resisted. The voice's warning clung to him like cobwebs. 20 more miles, and the static on the CB built again, louder, stranger. Faint voices floated up through the hiss, none distinct. He hesitated, then switched the unit back on. Immediately, the same voice clearer than before. "You didn't listen, Jimmy. It's getting worse." His hands tightened on the wheel. "Who the hell is this?" he demanded. "You got a real name? Or you just some joker riding Skip off the towers?" Silence, then a low chuckle. "You can smell it now, can't you? Like pennies, like rain on old iron. That's your engine bleeding." Jimmy inhaled sharply. This time, under the heavy wet stink of the highway, he caught a faint metallic tang, sharp and wrong. Was it coming from the vents, the rain, or was his imagination running wild? He flicked on the dome light, leaned over to peer at the floor. No leaks. The passenger seat was empty, except for a folded road atlas and his battered thermos. He popped the hood switch. As the truck rolled to a stop on the shoulder, the only sound was the idle rumble of the engine and the rain hitting the roof. Out in the wet dark, he swung down, flashlight in hand, boots sinking into soft mud at the roadside. Steam rose in slow clouds from the engine block. He swept the light over the hoses, the radiator, every seam and clamp. No drips, no stains. He bent closer, catching the subtle hint of copper in the air, but there was nothing to see, just the familiar grime and grease. He slammed the hood shut, shivering. The voice was in his head now, replaying every word. Back in the cab, he stared at the CB. His hand hovered over the switch. The CB crackled, the voice softer than before, but so close it might have been riding shotgun. Whispered, "It follows you, Jimmy. It always has." A chill ran down his spine. He started the engine, praying for the comforting roar of the diesel. The gauges flickered, then steadied, as if nothing had ever happened. He pulled back onto the road, rain falling harder now, each mile ahead darker than the last. And in the mirror, for just a second, he thought he saw something move, something bleeding in the night, just beneath the glow of his tail lights. Jimmy kept glancing in his side mirrors, eyes darting from the slick road to the deep shadows trailing his trailer's wheels. The world outside the cab felt thinner somehow, as if the storm had washed out the edges of reality. He rolled up the window, fighting the chill in his spine. The taste of copper lingered in the air, a phantom scent that made his teeth itch and his heart pound. His fingers drummed on the wheel, knuckles white. He flipped the CB back on, listening for chatter,
desperate for any familiar voice. Instead, the static rose and fell in broken, wave-like patterns. Once he thought he heard his own name again, just a breath, half swallowed by white noise. He shook it off. The road demanded focus. That's all it was. Fatigue, the hour, and the endless rhythm of the highway.
He rolled past a row of pines, headlights sweeping over wet bark and empty mile markers. The world felt abandoned. Even the critters seemed to have disappeared. No deer, no raccoons, no glowing eyes in the brush. The next sign read, "Fuel, 12 miles." He hesitated, but the needle was sliding close to E. He'd pull in, stretch his legs, check the oil, get another coffee, then keep rolling. Just another night on the blacktop. The rain let up as he pulled off at the exit, the tires hissing on broken pavement. The truck stop loomed ahead, half a dozen pumps under flickering yellow lights, a long rectangle of a building with a neon open sign that buzzed in the gloom. A lone sedan idled at the farthest pump, windows steamed, its driver hunched over the wheel. Jimmy coasted to a stop, engine idling rough for a beat before settling. He frowned, watching the touch needle jitter, then grabbed his flashlight. Under the hood, everything looked fine. No leaks, no smoke, nothing out of place. He checked the dipstick. Oil was maybe a shade darker than he liked, but full. He ducked beneath the cab, searching for drips, but the ground was only wet from rain, not oil or coolant. Still, the metallic scent lingered, thicker now. He ran his hand along the bumper, then jerked back. His palm was stained with a rusty smear. He stared at it, then at the grill. Tiny streaks of something dark red clung to the metal, almost lost in the road grime. A shudder crawled down his neck. He wiped his hand on a rag, blaming rust. The road, some mess picked up 100 miles back. He was halfway to convincing himself when the CB sputtered, "Big rig, don't go inside." Jimmy froze. He was parked 20 feet from the door, the light slicing the rain-soaked lot. He squinted at the sedan, its driver still hunched, unmoving, breath fogging the glass. The station's window was dark behind the neon, no sign of a clerk. He heard a faint tapping, then realized it was coming from his own trailer. He circled back, shoes squelching in the puddles. The tapping stopped. He stared at the latch, his reflection warped in the sheet metal. The CB let out a shrill burst of static. "They're watching. They want you to open the hood again." Jimmy spun, searching for anyone. Just a prank, some punk hiding out of sight. But the lot was empty, except for the sedan, which now seemed impossibly still. He checked his watch. 2:22 a.m. The numbers felt wrong, uncanny, his nerves humming. He climbed back in the cab and locked the door. The CB was alive with whispers now, too many voices layered on top of each other, rising and falling like the wind. He tried to tune it out, flipping to channel 19. Nothing but static, a hollow background hum. As he reached for his thermos, a shape flickered in the rearview mirror, pale, quick, almost human, vanishing in the corner of his eye. He jolted, spilled cold coffee down his shirt, and swore. He wiped his chin, staring at the mirror. Just the mist, he told himself, just the fog, and a tired mind. He keyed the mic, voice rough. "If this is a joke, you win. I'm getting off this road as soon as I hit the state line. So whoever you are, find somebody else to spook." The CB hissed back, and a single word drifted through the crackling air. "Bleeding." A chill swept through the cab. He watched the sedan, expecting its door to open, for someone to wave. Nothing. Its engine idled, but the driver's silhouette didn't move. He thought of the tap 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 on the trailer, the rusty smear on his hand, the metallic taste in his mouth.
He decided against coffee. He started the engine, headlights blazing against the rain-damp glass, and rolled out of the station, gravel crunching beneath his wheels. The CB fell silent as he hit the highway, the static replaced by a high, thin tone, almost like a distant siren. Mile by mile, the shadows thickened, shapes darted through the mist at the edge of his vision, tall and thin, impossible to catch, always one blink away from vanishing. In his mirrors, the puddles on the road gleamed darkly, as if trailing something behind him. At a lonely crossroads, a battered sedan flashed its brights. Jimmy slowed, rolling down his window, but the driver never even looked his way, just stared straight ahead, mouth moving silently, eyes wide and empty. The voice on the CB returned, urgent now, as the wind picked up. "Jimmy, you have to listen. You're not alone. Don't stop again. Whatever you do, don't let them inside." His hands shook on the wheel. He pressed the pedal, desperate for the next town, the next streak of light, the next voice that wasn't just a ghost in the wires. In the side mirror, something ran alongside his truck, long, thin, and dripping. The engine coughed once, and the metallic scent filled the cab. Jimmy drove on, heart pounding, the words echoing in his mind. "Your engine's bleeding, and something is waiting in the dark." Rain hammered the roof like drumming fingers, and the highway unraveled in warped ribbons under Jimmy's headlights. The smell of metal was stronger now, raw, rusty, like pennies clutched in a sweaty fist. He cranked the window open a crack, trying to force fresh air into the cab, but the wind brought only more of that sour tang. Every sense told him something was wrong, something deep in the bones of the truck, something leaking or dying. He kept glancing at his mirrors. In the thin wash of red from his taillights, the road glistened as if something wet and dark was pooling behind him. He pressed harder on the gas, feeling the engine shudder in a way he'd never heard before. The CB radio, silent for 10 minutes, crackled back to life with a shiver of static. His hands tensed on the wheel. "Jimmy, you have to listen," the voice pleaded, closer, younger, not quite human. "Don't stop at the next rest area. Don't let them catch up." His pulse jumped. The next rest area was still 30 miles out, a battered pull-off, where he usually stopped for cheap coffee and a nap. He glanced at the gauges again, temperature creeping up, oil pressure flickering just a hair below normal. He tried to steady his breathing, telling himself it was all in his head, a prank, some kid with a radio, a long stretch of bad weather making him see things. But then his headlights picked out something at the edge of the road, a shredded tire, then a glimmer of glass, then a shape hunched over the guardrail. For a split second, it looked like a person crawling, hands slick and glistening. Jimmy blinked and it was gone, swallowed by the night and the fog.
His nerves jangled. He turned up the cab lights and fished for his phone, hands trembling. No signal. Of course not. Out here, the world could fall apart, and no one would know, until the crows came picking at the bones. He pressed the mic, voice cracking. "Who is this? What do you want from me?" The static swelled, then the voice, more desperate. "They're almost here. Don't stop. Don't look back. The bleeding's not just the engine, Jimmy. It's you too." He swallowed hard, checking the mirrors again. For a moment, he caught a reflection, his own eyes, but rimmed in red, face gaunt and pale. It sent a jolt through him. Was he seeing things, or was the cab light just playing tricks? He passed a sign, "Rest Area 5 miles." His mind raced. He thought of stories he'd heard in trucker diners, old legends, truckers who vanished, trucks found abandoned with doors flung wide, the cab smelling of blood and metal and rain. Stories of the CB ghost, the voice of a driver killed in a pileup long ago, still warning others. On nights when the highway turned strange, the engine began to knock, a hollow, dreadful sound. Jimmy felt it in his teeth, in his chest, like a second heartbeat. The temperature needle jumped. The red warning light blinked on the dash. Something was very wrong. He slowed, but didn't stop. "Just get past the rest area," he whispered. "Just keep moving." The CB sputtered, then a new voice, a woman's, soft and distant. "You should pull over, sweetheart. Let us help you." Then a child's voice, high and broken. "It hurts, Jimmy. It hurts so much." He jammed the CB off, heart hammering. He could see the rest area coming up, a pool of light and emptiness. Just 2 trucks and a car in the lot, silhouettes slumped behind the wheel. The vending machine flickered. For a moment, every instinct screamed, to pull in, call for help, check the engine, just be around people, real people. But the voices swirled in his head. "Don't stop, don't look back." He pressed on, sweat cold beneath his jacket. As he passed the lot, his headlights caught faces in the dark, pale, open-mouthed, eyes staring straight through him. One of the trucks was leaking something thick and red, a puddle spreading across the asphalt. He blinked, and the lot was empty again, just rain and wind, and the hum of the road. Jimmy drove on, fighting the urge to look back. The engine's knock grew louder, more insistent. The cab felt smaller, the air thick with fear. He forced himself to recite his route, town names, mile markers, every detail he could remember from years on this stretch. Something old and heavy pressed at his memory. Years ago, a pile-up just beyond mile marker 113, a tanker overturned, a rig jackknifed, one driver never found. "Are you that voice?" he whispered, gripping the wheel. "Is that what this is?" The CB crackled back, softer than before. "I don't want you to end up like me." Rain battered the cab, thunder rolling in the distance. Jimmy blinked hard, fighting tears and exhaustion. The highway unwound ahead, endless and wet and waiting. In the mirror, for just an instant, he saw another rig right behind him, headlights gleaming, grill smashed, cab seeping something dark. Then it vanished. He pressed on, engine shuddering, refusing to stop, refusing to look back, haunted by a voice that was warning, and maybe, just maybe, begging to be remembered. The storm thrashed harder, wind beating the cab as if it wanted in. Jimmy hunched over the wheel, watching the highway dissolve into a silvery tunnel, every curve and pothole magnified by the failing wipers. The engine sounded worse now, a deep uneven clatter, like metal trying to grind through bone. Sweat beaded on his forehead, even as the cold pressed in from every side. He focused on the road ahead, counting the reflective markers as they whipped past. But something else caught his eye, shapes moving just outside the cone of his headlights. Sometimes they darted behind highway signs, sometimes they seemed to flicker across the road itself, too quick to be deer, too tall to be human. He tried to ignore them, but they multiplied in the corners of his vision, always running, always watching. The CB radio remained dead, but the echoes of the voices clung to the cab like the aftertaste of fear. Jimmy caught himself whispering, "Don't stop, don't look back," like a prayer or a spell. But the smell of metal was overpowering now, thick enough to taste, and his head throbbed with every revolution of the wheels. Then the dashboard lights dimmed, the engine coughed, stuttered, and for a terrible second, he thought it would die right there in the black. He let out a shout, slamming the heel of his hand against the dash. The gauges fluttered wildly, redlining, then settled back, but the sense of dread only deepened. Up ahead, the world shifted. He saw a sign, "Welcome to Haley's Crossing." He knew this town, or at least he thought he did, but as he slowed, peering through fog glass, nothing looked familiar. The gas station was dark, the motel a collapsed skeleton, only a single bulb burning in the empty diner across the street. He pulled off the road, more out of instinct and choice. The truck rumbled, idling rough, as Jimmy sat there, breathing shallow and fast. In the mirrors, the world warped, the raindrops ran up instead of down, the reflection of his headlights glowed red like wounds. Suddenly, something slammed against the side of the trailer, a hard wet smack that rattled the whole rig. Jimmy jumped, heart hammering. He fumbled for his flashlight, swinging it toward the window.
For a split second, he saw a pale hand pressed against the glass, long fingers trailing blood. Then it was gone, as if it had never been there. The CB crackled, startling him so badly, he nearly dropped the light. Static hissed and spat. Then the voice returned, raw and urgent. "Don't let them in, Jimmy. You know what they want. You know what you did." He gripped the mic, his own voice trembling. "What do you mean? I haven't done anything. I just want to go home." But the reply was only a whisper. "You left us. You kept going. That night, at mile 113, you never stopped."
Memory crashed through him. A snowy night, a tangle of wrecked vehicles, distant flashing lights. He'd been young, terrified, barely able to stop his own rig as he watched another truck spin out and vanish into the ditch. He'd kept going, heart pounding, telling himself there was nothing he could do. The radio was filled with panicked voices, shouts, and prayers, then silence. A shape loomed in the mist, stepping into the pool of his headlights. A man in a torn jacket, face smeared with oil and blood, eyes blank and black as the night. He stared at Jimmy, unblinking. Jimmy's breath caught. He tried to shift into reverse, but the gear stick wouldn't budge. The man raised a hand, and Jimmy saw the gash running down his arm. Open, raw, bleeding, the same thick, oily substance that now leaked from Jimmy's engine. The shapes multiplied, moving in jerks and shudders, pressing in from every side. They hammered at the doors, clawed at the windows, their faces pale and ruined, their voices layered in a chorus of accusation and grief. "Why didn't you stop, Jimmy? You left us to bleed. Let us in. Let us remember." His own voice joined theirs, a sob ripped from somewhere deep. "I'm sorry. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." The radio howled, louder than the storm. The gauges spun wildly. The engine's knocking became a scream, smoke pouring from under the hood. He felt hands pressing against every window, cold and slick, leaving streaks that bled into the glass. Jimmy closed his eyes, clinging to the wheel. "What do you want?" he pleaded. A single aching voice whispered through the radio, almost gentle. "You have to remember. You have to see us. Only then can you leave." As lightning cracked across the sky, Jimmy forced himself to look, to really look, at the faces pressed against the glass. Men, women, children, eyes wide, mouths moving in silent agony, each one etched into memory, frozen in the moment they were lost. And at the center, behind them all, the first voice, the voice from the CB, stood quietly, a hand pressed to a wound that never healed. The storm died away, leaving only the hush of rain, and the soft ghostly chorus whispering his name. The storm finally broke, rain, thinning to a fine mist, as if the highway itself had run out of tears. Jimmy's truck idled raggedly on the shoulder, outside the broken lights of Haley's crossing, the only movement the trembling of his own hands on the wheel. All around him, the world was strangely still, the pounding, the voices, the faces pressing in on the glass, gone, leaving only a smear of condensation, and a cold so deep it settled into his bones. But inside the cab, the air felt different, heavier, thick with a grief that wouldn't let go. Jimmy stared out through the streaked windshield, struggling to breathe. The CB radio sat silent now, but its presence was a weight on his chest. He picked up the mic, thumb hovering over the button, listening to the night breathe through the wires. Then, with a faint click, the radio sparked to life. No static this time, just the quiet hush of someone waiting. Jimmy forced himself to speak. "I see you," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I remember." There was no immediate answer, but in the mirror, he saw movement, a shape flickering in the back seat, where there had been only darkness before. A man's outline,
features washed out by shadow, but Jimmy recognized him instantly, not from life, but from the photos he'd seen, the memorial by the mile marker, the story whispered over weak coffee in late-night truck stops, the voice that had haunted the CB, night after night. "You left us," the figure said softly, sadness rolling off him like fog. "The night you passed mile 113. We called for help. You heard us." Jimmy shook his head, tears spilling over. "I was scared. I was young. There were already trucks wrecked behind me. I thought if I stopped I'd die too. I told myself someone else would help. They didn't," the voice replied, but there was no anger in it, only resignation. "No one ever does, not on that stretch." Jimmy gripped the wheel, feeling the weight of every lonely mile, every decision he'd ever made in the dark. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. "I never forgot. I see you every time I drive this road." The figure leaned forward, and for the first time, Jimmy saw his face, a wound slicing from temple to jaw, dark and wet, matching the engine's slow bleed. The ghost reached out, fingertips brushing the dashboard, and the CB crackled again. "Not everyone can stop Jimmy, but everyone remembers. That's what keeps us here." The ghost's eyes, black and endless, locked with his. "It's time to let us go." A sudden warmth spread through the cab, a lightness, the release of a pressure he hadn't realized he was carrying. The bleeding in the engine slowed, the warning lights on the dash dimmed to a soft, steady glow. Jimmy took a shaky breath, the metallic taste fading from his tongue. Outside, the first pale streaks of dawn began to break through the mist. The rain stopped. In the mirror, the faces reappeared, one last time, dozens of them, hovering just beyond the window. But now, their mouths were closed, their eyes calm. The chorus of accusation had become a silent farewell. Jimmy reached for the ignition, ready to turn the engine off, to step into the quiet. But the CB spoke one last time, the original voice gentler now. "Drive on, Jimmy, but don't forget what you've seen. The road always remembers." He nodded, tears wetting his cheeks. He shifted the truck into gear, easing back onto the highway, as the town of Haley's Crossing receded in the rear view. The morning sun burned away the last of the fog, and with it, the figures faded, one by one, until Jimmy was alone again. As he passed mile 113, he slowed, glancing at the side of the road. There a battered wooden cross leaned against the guardrail, a faded photo tacked beneath it. A weathered CB microphone hung from a nail, swinging gently in the breeze. Jimmy pulled over and climbed out, boots crunching in the damp gravel. He stood for a moment, hat in hand, listening to the hush of dawn. He whispered an apology, a thank you, and a promise never to pass without remembering. Back in the cab, the engine ran smooth and quiet. The gauges held steady. No voices filled the CB, only the ordinary static of life on the road. Jimmy drove on, each mile lighter than the last. In the passenger seat, for just a heartbeat, the outline of the ghost lingered, watching the sunrise face peaceful at last. Then it vanished, leaving only Jimmy, the empty highway, and the promise that memory could sometimes set even the loneliest souls free.